Welcome to Richer Soul, Erin Bradley. It's great to have you join us today.
Thanks, Rocky. It's a pleasure to be here.
And I'm excited to learn from you. We always start at the beginning. What was it like when you were growing up, and how much did your family and school teach you about money?
Wow, that is a loaded question. So I grew up youngest of five kids in the suburbs of Philadelphia, and my father was in wealth management. He was a stockbroker, financial planner, and heavily tied to the stock market as far as his wealth was concerned. And so it was an interesting journey growing up and experiencing times of great abundance. And then in those moments that the stock market crashed, we experienced times of great financial stress. And ironically, it happened at pivotal times in my life. First time I remember experiencing a market crash, I was in fourth grade, which I think would have put us is that 1988, 89 crash? There was a crash around that time.
There was a crash, I believe, the flash crash of 87.
Okay, so that was the year. And yeah, that would make sense because we moved into our new home in 1988. And they were building their version of a dream home. And that was a 6 bedroom, 6 bathroom, 6,000 square foot home. And it was the first house being built in this rural neighborhood that used to be farmland. And it was, again, my parents' dream home. They loved entertaining. My mom is one of nine. She has 67 first cousins. I have 35 first cousins. So record numbers at Thanksgiving would be like 84 people. So, it wasn't really just for pomp and circumstance that they were building this beautiful home. They filled it. There were many memories made there. However, when they were building it, they were planning to fund this new build with their cash reserves, AKA money in the stock market. So when the market crashed, they were in the middle of building this property and they had to continue on. And so I remember just feeling a lot of financial stress in the household. And when we finally moved into the house, there was this perception from my peers that we were rich, right? We lived in a mansion. And I remember knowing that we are far from it. And I don't even get lunch money to buy a hot dog at school. I've got to pack that peanut butter and jelly. And it was the first memory that I have that I think developed a significant money block that I've been working to dissolve for a lifetime. And that was that, we don't need this. I don't know why they did this. We were living in already a 3,500 square foot home with 5 bedrooms, and my oldest brother had already left for college. So I finally had my own room at the old house, and it was in the neighborhood where I could ride my bike everywhere. And there was a pool in the backyard, ride your bike to the candy store, to the swimming pool, all the things. So when this happened, I think it was a defining moment for me to think to myself, you don't need this. You don't need money to be happy, etc. And so fast forward to when I graduated from college with a business degree from Boston College, and I am coming out of college, and one of my older sisters who had been doing great in corporate America had just had her first baby and had decided to be a stay-at-home mom. And I remember thinking to myself, all four of my siblings went to good colleges on the East Coast, got business degrees, went into corporate America, started succeeding in business. And I thought to myself, I only have this little window. If I'm going to maybe someday be a stay-at-home mom, I don't know, right? At 22 years old, you don't know what you want. And so I decided to go travel for a couple years. And I joke I lived like a hobo, just rubbing pennies together to make it to payday. But at the end of the day, I had this huge limiting belief around money. Like I didn't want to make it the object of my desire. And as a result, I started struggling financially because I didn't know how to prioritize creating abundance for myself with this resistance that I had within me. And when the market crashed again in 08, 09, it was another pivotal point in our journey and in our story with money because my parents lost everything again. And it was just a whole nother cycle of, struggle around money in 08, 09. And so, like I said, it's been a lifetime of deprogramming a negative relationship with money to create space to welcome abundance and then have the wherewithal to be on a mission to help other people do the same. Because I know I'm not the only person who has those stories. Like, as long as I make X, I'm fine, right? We're playing small by default. We don't realize it when we have that mentality, but we're holding ourselves back because of some deep-rooted fear that probably came from some pivotal moment in our childhood where our money story was developed. So it was an interesting journey of highs and lows, but we also weren't really taught about money. So we could only be a witness to it. and then try to develop our own relationship with it. So it's been a curious journey for me for sure.
It's surprising because you're telling me that your dad's a financial planner, and yet the financial plan can't weather a storm, and they didn't teach you about money, which there's like that dichotomy there that's kind of funny. And it's interesting.
It was, yes. And more, more interesting than everything is we were also definitely instilled with a YOLO philosophy. You only live once. And so I remember in 2008, I had just gotten married. I had nothing. I mean, that's a whole nother story, is the financial rock bottom I experienced in my own 2008 that began the story that has evolved to where I am today. But I remember my sisters were going on a trip to Peru. One of my sisters was working for an organization that was doing this incredible bucket list adventure, climbing the Inca Trail to Machu Picchu with a bunch of musicians and having concerts along the way, all to raise money for a cancer foundation. And I said I couldn't go. And my dad was like, "You're never going to regret figuring out how to pay off the credit card, but you will regret not doing the trip. So you only live once, so do the thing." And so, I did go on that trip and I did pay off the credit card eventually, but it is a little bit backwards. That's why I'm saying there's a deprogramming of the relationship with money so that you can walk that fine line between living life at the fullest and experiencing all there is to offer, and also knowing your numbers so that you can fund those adventures.
Yes. And we'll probably go deeper into the sense of what's really worth it. Like, we chase things like the 6-bedroom house, but at the end of the day, you're like, but it wasn't necessarily worth it in a sense. At least that's the feeling I got.
Well, that's what I thought when I was 10 years old. But after 20 years of memories created in that house, I feel like, you know what, they figured it out in the end. And it did feel worth it because I do have a lifetime of incredible memories in that home. And honestly, even when I think about the financial decline that happened in 2008, a huge piece of it was a byproduct of the level of generosity of my parents. To me, a recklessness, it was a deep-seated desire to be home based. My mom was the second oldest, but the matriarch. She had an older brother and a younger brother and 6 younger sisters. And when my grandparents were no longer able to be home base for all those holidays where we would all come together, and we still all come together at my aunt's house at the lake. And so she sort of, taken over the baton since my parents downsized many years ago, right? But I do feel that while there's some lessons to be learned from a financial perspective, the impact they made on the lives that they touched with their generosity over the years in their community, in their church, in their family, in my life, and the lives of everyone I know and love, I can't really fault them for that because there was a heart of gold there, behind this vision that they had, and they fulfilled their vision, and they left a legacy.
And that's important. I can't imagine Thanksgiving with 84 people and the bickering
No
making your
no
families much
bickering,
better.
no bickering.
Everybody likes everybody. That is wonderful.
Lots of laughter and lots of adult beverages and reindeer games
Yes.
for the kids.
All right. Well, that does sound idyllic.
It was good.
So, one of the things, though, that affected you was having a lot of friends die at an early age. Can you share a little bit about that and what was going on?
Yeah, so it all intertwines, right? You've got this roller coaster with the financial piece as sort of the backdrop to childhood, and then this YOLO philosophy, you only live once, and just kind of say yes to life. And then all the while, 5 of my closest friends died before the age of 23, starting at 5th grade. And there was brain tumor, there was cancer, there was car accident. It was all different kinds of cause of death. But it got to a point where we're at the same cemetery, the same church for the funeral, finally old enough to be drinking a beer after the ceremony at a local pub. And how are we here again? How are we here celebrating the life of another one gone in this little town that we lived in? It was so unbelievable, right? And I remember very clearly sitting across from my friends and either thinking or saying out loud that we have 2 options. We can either accept mortality as a part of life and choose to recognize the fact that we have no idea how long we're here and go live our fullest potential, or we can think that it's doom or gloom and be depressed indefinitely and kind of sink into a dark hole. And so I have always felt like the concept, the motto, if not now, when, is not a lighthearted cliche for me. It's a deeply rooted philosophy, fundamental to how I live. And so how that plays into life nowadays is just things like my husband and I living in Denver, Colorado, and buying a little condo in the mountains. And we were here every weekend in a ski town. And we were having dinner one night talking about how we'd love to move there someday, someday when the kids grow up and they're out of school. Well, our oldest was in kindergarten when we were having this conversation in 2015. And I remember thinking, not to be morbid, but we really don't know how long we've got. And to wait 14 years to fulfill a pipe dream seems crazy to me. I mean, I had all the reasons why we can't or we shouldn't. And that's important, is that there is a process of getting intimate with the stories and the reasons that become the excuses for why we're unwilling to pursue something, for reasons that, like, I can't, because to me is just defending the limitation of my mind. So whatever follows because is usually a made up story about the worst case scenario. And so if you're willing to play with it a little bit and sort of go through all the reasons why we quote unquote cannot, what we discovered was that the worst case scenario of doing it now in 2015, 2016, with worst case scenario is we come back to where we are right now. So we decided to take the chance and come for the summer. And long story short, it ended up doubling my business and became the best decision we've ever made. And we've been living our best life ever since. But like, that's an example of how my childhood plays into my process for decision making. And it happened again in 2020. We were thinking about doing a month in Europe in 2020, but obviously that didn't happen. So instead, once we decided we were going to homeschool the kids rather than have them in and out of the classroom, we decided we could go on a 6-month RV road trip and homeschool them. So again, I thought this could put me out of business. My clients might think that I've gone off the grid and I'm not working. But what's the worst case scenario? Maybe business slows down for 6 months. And when I come back, I know what to do to turn on the faucet again and bring it up again. So worst case scenario is this. We do it anyway. We had a 50% increase in business while I was on the road. So the worst case scenario is often unlikely. You just have to be willing to create plans and strategies to prepare for the worst while also be willing to say yes to life. And then do the things now, because I don't even know if we would have enjoyed some of the things we were considering postponing, 14 years later. I just think that we have these desires and these impulses and these callings that we are so successful at talking ourselves out of because of fear and uncertainty and self-doubt. And yet it seems like the more I recognize the fear and make decisions in spite of it or strategize around it and plan for the worst, but go for the best keeps happening. Like the biggest risk keeps on turning out to be the smartest decision.
There are seasons in life, right? You can only do certain things with young kids, and there's certain things you can do with older kids, and there's certain things you want to do when you don't have kids. And so you have to enjoy the season, which it sounds like you're doing. And you are right. I think we put lots of limitations on what we believe. I'm wondering, is there a difference between if not now, then when and YOLO, or are they in your mind the same?
I don't know. I don't really say YOLO so much. I feel like if not now, when usually is a concept I apply when I hear myself saying why I can't, why I shouldn't, why that's not realistic, that's not probable, maybe that's not responsible. I don't know. I hear myself saying I can't. And then I say, well, how could I? I think that the words I can't are similar to I won't. It means I'm choosing not to. I've closed the door. I can't is like closing the valve, right? How can I awakens creativity and opens up the possibilities and the solutions. And it's like this moving along the scale. I think it was in the 12-week year that they talk about how do you move from impossible, I can't, to possible, how can I, to probable, how might I make that happen, to inevitable, what's it going to feel like when we've done it, right? And there's a mindset shift that happens along that scale to get you out of all the reasons why you can't and result in staying stuck where you are and move that impossible to inevitable. And I think it can happen more quickly than people realize.
It can. You can go super fast. There's no doubt about it. And the 12-week year is all about doing in one quarter what most people do in a year, because, they start off strong and then they forget. And at the end of the year, they try and rush and catch up. So the whole middle is kind of missing the point of what you're supposed to be doing. And so that's a big part of it. Now, throughout this time, I mean, you built money, you built success, and you had lots of money, but you weren't thrilled with life at that point, at
Yes.
some point,
Well,
right?
it was a bit of a ride. And, you know, I should take you back to when I said I took a couple years and traveled. So when I made that decision to postpone, quote unquote, the real world, right? Like I said, I was graduating college. I could have easily gone and gotten that good job in the city. But I said to my parents, I have plans to honestly just be selfish for a few years and travel and do the things that I know I won't regret doing someday later. And so I got a job at Outback Steakhouse right after college, after my parents had supported me getting a great business degree from Boston College. I went and took a serving job at Outback and lived at home. And I was thinking, like, much to my parents' chagrin, but they were used to me at this point. So I started saving my money to pay for my adventures, and I kayaked the coast of Mexico for a month in March of 2002, I guess. And right before I left for Mexico to go off the grid, I put a deposit down for a 1 month course in Barcelona to get certified to teach English as a second language. So I was leaving to go to the airport, and I say, by the way, when I get back, I'm going to bartend my butt off for a couple months, and then I'm going to Barcelona. And so I go to Barcelona and I do the 1 month course, and I meet some friends and I sign a lease on an apartment, only to realize I don't have a job or a way to pay for that apartment. So I remember at one point convincing my girlfriends that since we saw these guys selling beers out of backpacks at the beach and at the plazas and the music festivals and at the park, that if they could do it, so could we. So we filled a trash bag full of beer and ice, and we bought cans of beer for 37 cents and sold them for €1, a dollar, basically. And, we did that, sold enough beers until we had rent money. So the entrepreneur was in there from the beginning as solutions oriented. And we ended up finding very low paying jobs, making basically $10,000 a year cash under the table and running out of money every single month and living on buttered noodles for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Not exaggerating. So after about 2 years of that and coming home in the summers and bartending, I finally find myself in Denver, Colorado. And I'm in the bar industry, but I'm also teaching Spanish, teaching English, just kind of hodgepodging ways to pay my bills. And somebody tells me, you'd be great in the mortgage business. And I'm thinking to myself, at this point, I'm not doing corporate America. I've avoided the real world. I might as well just keep on avoiding it. And somebody's like, no, check it out. So I meet the owners, and it's a small Latino mortgage company, and they needed a bilingual American to help with some of the marketing. So it looked really fun. I mean, the salespeople were 100% commission. They were coming to work in jeans and a t-shirt, doing yoga in the middle of the day, putting on their suit to go to closing. And I'm thinking, this is the life for me. Footloose and fancy free. I can work from anywhere. I can travel. It's going to be great. So I decided to take the leap and go 100% commission in the summer of '07 with no financial safety net, no plan, no systems, no confidence. And by the summer of 2008, we know what's happening in the market. I mean, I had nothing to lose. I only had one way to go but up. But I really struggled with sales and being seen as salesy. I mean, I had a paralyzing insecurity. Even though I'm an extrovert, I really struggled with traditional sales training. So I had fallen flat on my face. I was about 35 grand in credit card debt, maxed on all my credit cards. And I got a referral for a new client. And I had to ride my bike 5 miles across town in the summer of '08 to meet him because I didn't have enough money for gas. And so I tried to get there early because I didn't want him to see me show up on a bike, and I had to figure out what to wear and look professional, but also be able to ride a bike and, get there early so the sweat could dry off. And unfortunately, he got there early too. And he introduced himself to me at the counter as my credit card was being declined for a cup of coffee.
Mm.
And I actually thought that was the card that would work because that was the one I chose to use. I didn't know if the other ones would work. And so I didn't want to try another one. So I just lied. I was like, that's so weird. I'm going to have to call the bank. And he bought my coffee and I found myself at financial rock bottom. So that was the kind of the beginning of the story. And at the moment, I called my dad and I asked for advice. And he said, if you think you're going to be good at this, do whatever it takes. And I opened another credit card, bought internet leads, hired a coach, and I started following the plan that they gave me. And I had some traction. And within a couple years, I read The Go-Giver, and The
Mhm.
Go-Giver changed my life and changed my whole philosophy of what I was doing here and in business. And so I developed my own strategy to be a resource to people when they don't need my services. And the business more than doubled seemingly overnight. And I started teaching it to other real estate professionals, and their business grew. And before long, I was just surviving my own success. I was pregnant with my second child, working 24/7, tethered to my phone from morning until night. And I asked people around me who I perceived to be successful or ahead of me in the game how they're doing it. And they all admitted that they too would put their kids to bed and work in their home office until 10, 11, 12 o'clock at night. And so I remember talking to my husband and telling him, I think I need to quit. I don't think I'm cut out for this, because if that's what more successful looks like, and I'm already over here drowning in life and business, I don't think I aspire to that. This is not what freedom and flexibility looks like. This is not what I signed up for. I mean, I worked my ass off to get here and I'm grateful to have the money, but I'm miserable. And I know that I'm not the only person that's ever experienced that. And what I found in my experience for several years and what I've been a witness to is that people will either convince themselves to suck it up and survive because this is what pays the bills and we're lucky and we're in this great season. But mentally and emotionally, they're saying when it slows down, I'll come up for air. And then when it slows down, which they've invited, they don't feel rested and relaxed. They panic. And so then it's like, now I'm freaking out. My business slowed down. I better turn the faucet on again. And then put your foot on the gas and hit your head against the ceiling and then second guess it and either suck it up and survive or shrink, right? And then it dries up again. And it's this vicious cycle that we have to figure out how to get away from. And I think that's the point at which lifestyle and business design become critical. Like, how do you organize a business that fuels and finances a life where life is the whale in the bathtub and not work in the whale in the bathtub with life squished in around the edges?
I was away at a men's group this weekend, and my biggest aha was people like to make life difficult.
Yes.
Like, I'm sitting here going, if you do XYZ, it's real simple, it's real easy, you achieve what you want. And yet people make it difficult. Like, and what you're basically telling me is people made their business difficult. It
Yeah.
doesn't have to be. I, like you, I've built a business that's easy, so to speak. It works around my life, and it was built with that in mind. I just saw a quote the other day that everyone hears time is money. This one was time is more precious than money. Because let's face it, you don't know how long you have. And I think we give our time away too cheaply.
Yeah. I also heard a saying one time that to a child, love is spelled Time.
Yes. Yeah, it is. Being with them. And for whatever reason, I think people make it too difficult. And it doesn't have to be. And when you can create that simplicity and you come from a place of abundance, go giver, and doing all of that, is this going to happen in 24 hours? No, it takes time, it takes effort. But it's definitely doable, but it is mindset shifts. Now, I know you talked about money scripts. When did those kind of shift? Was there a turning point, or was that a slow journey to changing kind of your relationship with money?
Well, I would say, first of all, from that moment in 2008, we had actually recently bought our first house, despite what we were experiencing financially, but we bought our first place for about $95,000 with a loan, 3.5% down. And for all intents and purposes, we got lucky, right, with the timing. We were in downtown Denver in a neighborhood that wasn't exactly safe at the time, but I had a good feeling about where it would be in the future, and I wasn't wrong. And so we were in that property as we were engaged. And after our son was born, a couple years later, we ended up keeping it accidentally when we moved into a new property up the road. And I always joke we became accidental real estate investors. And it worked out really well for us. So then strategically, we kept house number 2 when we bought our third house with a VA loan. And we thought that was our forever home, which now we know is a joke because our 14-year-old is in his 8th home. So then we bought the condo in the mountains. And again, we got lucky. We were ahead of the curve in this little ski town, and we got a place for $195,000. And so, as we were starting to learn about building wealth and cash flowing assets and things like that, I felt like, I alluded to earlier when I experienced burnout, at first I tried to survive it because I felt lucky because the money was good and I was making more than I ever had expected as a younger version of me. And then I tried to shrink. I thought if I could just do less business, then I'll have more time and I'll be happier and more present with my kids. And unfortunately, I don't believe human beings are designed for shrink. I think we're here to expand. And the reason I know this is because every time we've achieved something, we celebrate for how long before it becomes our new normal. And then we're on the leading edge of the next desire. So there's an aspect, if you think about the book, The Gap and the Gain by Benjamin Hardy, where the goalpost keeps moving. And so when I read that probably 4 or 5 years ago, it was right at that crossroads of we're going on the road. I'm going to be on the road for 6 months. I have 9 employees at this point in my mortgage business. I have a podcast, a coaching business. We're real estate investing. We're homeschooling the kids. And I need to figure out how to unbecome this version of me that had become accustomed to racing all the time, like just cramming way too much in and feeling rushed and stressed and overconnected and overcommitted and overwhelmed all the time. And even though I had started to scale the business, which I think is the only alternative to survive it, shrink it, or scale it, right? If you want to get out of your own way, you've got to have better systems and people to help you run those systems. And I had all those pieces in place. I started scaling in 2014 and now it's 2020. And I had an amazing team and great systems, but I still felt like I was perpetuating this rushed, stressed, overwhelmed version of me. And so on that road trip, I just made a commitment. I started reading stuff like Michael Singer's work, The Surrender Experiment and The Untethered Soul. And I started thinking about that experience as my own personal surrender experiment because I just had to surrender. I mean, the 4 of us were in a tiny RV. We were not in like a 40-foot home on wheels. We were just in a little 23-footer with no slides. So it was crazy. And in that journey of unbecoming, I started to realize that the less I feel that I need to control the outcome and that I won't be satisfied until I arrive at that destination, and the more I loosen the grip, lighten up a little bit, just surrender, the more I started to notice how many opportunities were always in front of me. Like doors are always opening, new relationships are always showing up in the path. And I started to reflect on the fact that leading up to that point, so much of the good stuff in my life was unscripted and unsolicited by me. If I could look back to the relationships that became clients or referral partners or just friends or mentors or just door openers, whatever, I didn't conjure them up in my brain and then go hunt them down. I mean, you and somebody connected you and me, and I didn't like premeditate and analyze my way into connecting with you and hopefully being on your show. Like I was inspired to reach out to you because I love your show. You somehow the paths crossed, right? The stars aligned. And here we are. And it's something that I'll look back on a year from now and be glad that it happened. But it led me to this feeling that instead of feeling like we have to figure it all out and connect all the dots looking forward and be unsatisfied until we arrive at that destination, I think we can reverse engineer it. I think we can curate vacation energy and access joy and satisfaction and present moments and make that our priority. And when we do that, I start to see the unfolding right before my eyes. And so instead of fearing the unknown, it's like, let's revel in it. It's really fun to see what happens if you get more curious than fear based, needing to figure it all out, right? Like the analysis paralysis that has us so myopic in our vision of the next right thing, and that someday I'm going to get a chance to wake up and live, but not until I've done this, and not until that's right, and not until this is figured out, all these other things. So I don't know. It's just been this journey. It was like a journey from broke to burnout to broke to burnout to enough is enough. I'm going to create a business, and then I'm going to hire the help and get the mentors and put myself in the communities with the people that remind me of my future and start to expand that vision. And then as you do, you start to realize that none of it was figured out before it happened. Does that make sense?
Yes, it's very hard to connect dots going forward. It's really easy to see them going in hindsight, right?
Yeah.
I never would have imagined the things I did throughout my life got me to where I am today. Like I wouldn't have seen those things connecting,
Yeah.
and yet
I read something this
they
morning
did.
that was like, you got to get in the game. Just get in the game, because spectators and critics go nowhere. And you can't learn from the sidelines, because half of the things that you're going to learn aren't happening until the third quarter. You got to be in the game to know what's coming. And I think it helps us to relax a little bit when you go back to your 20-year-old self, and in some area of your life and business or health, relationships, accomplishments, whatever, you've exceeded the expectations of him or her. Like they had no
Mm.
clue what was about to unfold. And I think that's pretty cool, because it's a reminder that we have no clue what our actual potential is, which truly is limitless. And it's also not a straight line. It's a long and winding road, but it can be a really fun adventure if you're in the game, if you're playing the game and having a little fun with it and being a little more curious about what might be coming around the corner instead of needing to know before you're willing to take the first step.
And that I very much believe. I think and I know for me, the first step is the hardest. The rest of them become easy, but it's taking the first step that is always the hardest. And I have found whenever I have taken the first step, it all became easy over time. Not that it happened second step, but until you get moving, nothing changes. And I think for a lot of people, at least for me, that was the struggle, is that first step. But once you do it, then you go. And I think I'm at a place in my life where I now want to play games without scoreboards. So there's no outcome, right? You're playing the game is the fun of it, not the outcome of the game. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's how I live. And it's interesting because again, we want to reverse engineer. We want to
Yeah.
connect all the dots moving forward. And we want to know before we start that it's going to work. And the truth of the matter is, it's funny. There's a Martin Luther King quote that says, you don't need to see the whole staircase to take the first step. And
Mhm.
I've also heard this analogy of driving on the highway at night, where you're going 70 miles an hour on the highway. Your headlights can only illuminate so far in front of you, but you're not pumping the brakes because you can't see 3 miles down the road. You're just cruising at that speed, right? Even though it's always unfolding, it's being illuminated as you approach it, it's being illuminated again and again. And I genuinely have faith now, because I've seen what has unfolded leading up to now, that it's on its way. It's always on its way to something great. It's always on its way to something great. That's a choice, right? I heard recently, I think it was Eckhart Tolle that said, if the imagined future feels better than your current reality, then there's eager anticipation. Like, this is going to be fun. I'm super excited. I don't need to see all the dots, but I know it's going to be good, right? And if the future is worse, it creates anxiety. And both are illusory. Both are just imagined. And so I
Mm.
realize
Mhm.
easier said than done, but like, instead of what if it doesn't work, what if it does? What would happen if it works? And how would I celebrate? And how would I have an impact on the world around me? And how could I contribute more to the lives of people I care about near and far? And what would that look like? What if it works? And then just get in there and get your hands in the clay and have a little fun.
And that's what you have to do. Speaking of surrounding yourself with people, you're actually in a group with some of our past guests, Tim Rhodes, who started GoBundance, Mandy McAllister. I think she's still in charge, right? Running the women's
Yep.
side.
She's
Yep.
our fearless leader, CEO.
How has GoBundance helped you?
Well, immeasurably. It's been 4 years. And I will back up by saying that ever since I hired that first coach out of sheer desperation in 2008, I've never been without a strategic coach, at least one, if not more. And I believe deeply in the power of hanging around people that remind you of your future. So if I see somebody that I admire who's doing things that I desire for myself in life or in business or health or whatever, rather than assume it was easy for them, I want to get in the room with them and I want to figure out what they did and what mistakes they made and learn from them. Because I found that if I look at someone on chapter 10 and I'm on chapter 1 and I'm curious enough to learn their story, I might get to their chapter 10 by my chapter 4 or chapter 6. Like I can learn from their mistakes, I can learn from mine. And I've come to embrace imposter syndrome. Imposter syndrome is real no matter what you've accomplished in your life. When you put yourself in the room with people that you perceive to be ahead of you in the game in some capacity, you're going to feel a little out of place, maybe, or a little bit awkward or whatever. And I've learned that that is a sheer, clear indication that I'm in the right place. Because if I'm on the leading edge of expansion in my own life, if I'm trying to go someplace I've never been before, there's no way I'm going to put the pin in the GPS for some foreign land, unfamiliar territory, and not have trepidation around it or second guess myself and wonder if I can do it. If I'm not feeling all those things, then I'm trying to play small. And I feel like playing small suffocates me and suffocates everybody, right? Like when we are in hesitation because of discomfort or uncertainty, then we're not moving forward. And I just don't want to live my life like a spectator. I want to get in the game. And I feel like being in the room, GoBundance, what has been an absolute gift to my life. And it's one common denominator. We're having conversations in those rooms that you can't always have with your best friends that energize you. And I love the saying that sometimes you have to borrow the belief you see in someone else, and sometimes you borrow the belief they see in you. So when you're in a room and your belief isn't quite there yet, you're still second guessing, but you see somebody else doing something, you can borrow their confidence and say, if they can do it, maybe I can too. And oftentimes you're going to borrow the confidence they see in you, because people are going to sit you down, look you in the face and say, what are you talking about? Rocky, you got this. Like you're amazing, and these conversations are had, and you need that. You need to be surrounded by people that are reaching and giving you that hand up and inspiring you, supporting you, educating you, whatever. So I encourage everybody listening, seek out the place where you feel a little bit of imposter syndrome. Make sure to be on purpose of contributing however you can. And I believe that the abundance follows the level of contribution you chase.
And it's true. And you have to be clear with what you want and go for it. And that's a big part of it. No doubt there whatsoever. You mentioned a strategic coach, and I wasn't sure. Are you talking about a coach that's strategic, or are you talking about the Dan Sullivan program strategic coach?
Oh no, I just mean coaches in general. Like
Okay,
when
that's fine.
a coach to grow my business, a coach to scale my business, a coach to manage many businesses, a coach to, grow an online platform, a coach. Yeah. I mean, coaches, mentors, communities. If I feel like there's something to learn, which I believe that I never know what I don't know, even just having the podcast, like I don't know about you, but I learned so much on my podcast. The people I have on my show and the things I hear and the notes I take or the strategies I learn from my guests have moved my life forward. It's incredibly energizing to be around growth minded, living on purpose kind of people, doing interesting things. And again, if you're out there curious, you'll find those dots start connecting much more quickly.
And I agree. It's honestly the main reason I keep doing the podcast is because the people I meet, the connections I make, and the off-air conversations that
Yeah.
happen prior to and post, and kind of what happens after that. It's beyond just the actual conversation. And that's a big, big part of it overall. And I don't think people always realize that and how much of a difference it makes. How do you decide? In other words, let's say I want a coach for X. So now I've said I need a coach who does X. How do you decide which coach then to pick? Do you have a framework or do you just kind of go with your gut or?
Honestly, they've all found me.
Oh,
I remember, I don't mean like they found me, sought me. I mean like they came into my frame of reference at the exact right time. For example, from 2015 to 2018, I had hired my first team member in the summer of 14. We took about 3 months to train and the volume slowed down. And then I said, okay, it's go time. You know what you need to do. I know what I need to do. Let me go do my part. And the business more than doubled seemingly overnight. And before long, I mean, we had 17 closings in 1 month, which is a lot for two people. So I joke that in 2015, I started dragging bodies onto a speeding train, just saying, like, grab a seat. You can do this. You can do this. So by the time I found this coach, it was specific to scaling a mortgage business. And so I had seen a couple of ads on Facebook. And funny enough, one of the success stories was a kid I grew up with. So I sent him a message on Facebook. I hadn't talked to the guy in 20 years. And I was like, is this legitimate? Is this coaching program where it says that you can scale your business and not work nights and weekends and take Fridays off? And he's like, yes, it is legit. And I joined it. And I remember that was the end of summer 2015. And I was talking with him and I said, yeah, we have a 10-year plan to get a condo in the mountains. He's like, why not now? So he had the same philosophy as me. And then I was like, I don't know why not now. Actually, we can do it now. And so we did. And then a couple months later, I told him about the conversation I had with my husband about moving there full time. And he's like, well, why not now? And I was like, yeah, why not now? So anyway, by the summer of 2016, I had moved full time to the mountains. I was living my dream life. I started my own branch of the company. I mean, I can attribute a lot to the 3 years I spent in that community. And when we moved up here, our kids don't have school on Fridays. So that was the last time I worked a Friday. I just stopped working Fridays because the kids don't have school on Fridays. And people think like, well, you can't do that. It's like, but how can I? So put a good system in place and have somebody to cover you and you'll figure it out. I don't go off the grid. If somebody needs to get a hold of me, they can get a hold of me. I'm just going to be on the ski lift, most likely. Anyway, same thing. Like Sharon Lechter was my mentor for a while. And she just, her name popped up 3 times in a 24-hour period. And I thought, that's not random. I'm going to have to meet this lady. And, at the time I was running multiple businesses and real estate investing, lots of things, spinning a lot of balls, spinning a lot of hats. What is it? Juggling the balls, spinning the hats, whatever. So I needed a coach that could relate to that and not think I'm crazy. And she was the one. So she was a huge part of my life, is a big part of my life. And yeah, I feel like what's that saying? When the student is ready, the teacher appears.
yes,
I think
exactly.
that's for me, Rocky.
So do us a favor, because I don't know if most people know who Sharon Lechter really is and what she is behind.
So she co-authored the Rich Dad series with Robert Kiyosaki, and they were business partners for about 15 years before I think they just went different ways, because I think their branding was going to become more like Robert Kiyosaki was going to be Robert Kiyosaki brand. So they just parted ways as business partners. But they worked together for many years, and they wrote Rich Dad, Poor Dad at her kitchen table, which I've sat at. It's pretty cool, actually. And yeah, she's amazing. She wrote Think and Grow Rich for Women in partnership with the Napoleon Hill Foundation. She wrote Exit Rich, lots of probably authored another 15 books or so. And she's a keynote speaker, an incredible human and philanthropist. And she's just a wonderful person who's making a great impact on the world with financial literacy.
I've always thought she was the brains behind Rich Dad, Poor Dad. I don't know if it's true, but that's just the feeling I got.
Yeah, that's the feeling.
And it's incredible that you get coached by people like that. Did you ever imagine something like that was possible?
I mean, no, that's what I'm saying. Like 48 hours before I set up a call with her, I hadn't even heard of her before. You know what I mean?
Okay.
Look, this is a big piece of it, is that, and it kind of comes down to the people I love to work with, as a mentor and a coach, is that I have invested probably hundreds of thousands of dollars in myself to expand my belief system, to expand my network, to expand my mindset, to my knowledge, my whatever, my skills. And I love being around people that aren't afraid to do that, that understand that we are limited. I'm always on the leading edge of something, and my brain is never going to go away. It's never going to stop trying to protect me and talk me out of taking a big leap because it hasn't figured out if it's safe or not. And so I don't believe I'd be where I am if I hadn't invested in myself, which is fine. But before I took that leap and hired a coach, even when I was maxed out on my credit cards, I was desperate, and I realized that I wasn't going to get out of this on my own. And you look at athletes, you think about, even sounds so silly, but I just joined a curling team, the sport, the curling, for the winter. I don't know how to play, but people are showing me how. But if they weren't showing me how and I was just trying to learn off of a YouTube video, I probably wouldn't get very good. But if I'm hanging around somebody who's been playing for a little while and they see my form and they see what I'm doing, they can fine tune it and I can get better really fast. Same thing with skiing. Like when I'm skiing with people that are better than me, I get faster and I get better because I ask them for feedback and they're like, oh, well, you're doing this. You just need to do that. People can see in you the potential to get better that you can't see in yourself. And it's very simple for me. I've never felt like I spent money or it cost me anything. If I'm honest, it cost me not to. Like it cost me not to get in the room and hire the coach. So, I just hired a marketing team that was a $15,000 investment for a specific amount of time. Let's say that brings in another 100,000 in revenue. It's not costing me 15,000. It's costing me 85,000 not to, because that's not my zone of genius. And I'm realizing that. I'm like, oh my gosh, this person is so much more skilled at this. So, I think we just need to be not afraid to invest in ourselves if we want to enjoy the journey.
And I agree with you. I think that's a mindset shift for a lot of people. I find that business owners, it seems to be much more natural than people in general.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure why, but it is what it is. That's okay.
Well, the irony is that I had thought about getting my master's degree, and had I gotten an MBA, I would have ended up probably, I don't know, $100,000 in student loan debt or something like that. To what? To learn some skills, to be more successful, to get a higher paying job. So even when I found myself in all that debt, I remember reminding myself that if I had gone and gotten an MBA, it would have cost me too. So this is the cost of learning. I learned from my mistakes too. I'm unlikely to repeat the same mistakes twice. So that's another piece of it, is that if you wanted to go learn another skill, you'd probably have to pay to go back to school. So it's no different in the business world. You want to take it to the next level, hire somebody that's going to help you get there. They're going to teach you how.
I'm not a fan of school. And I'm not a fan of school because I think by the time they figure out a curriculum and they create it and they release it, the world has moved on.
Yeah.
A, and B, I'd rather work with people who've actually done it than people who just teach it, so to speak, in the sense of they didn't do it, they learned about it, so through schooling. So they haven't actually walked it. And I think that's where you miss it, is those nuances. Like, in other words, I'm not a great skier, and I could read a great skiing book about technique and I could not tell you how to ski better, even though I read the book and I'm a master at this curriculum, so to speak. It's actually by doing it, noticing it and feeling it and seeing it. And I think that's why that kind of resonates more with me.
Yeah, for sure.
Is there something we should have talked about today that we haven't gotten a chance to?
That's all I've got. I gave you all the wisdom I have.
I am sure you have more wisdom. As soon as we hang up, you'd be like, oh, I should have said.
Drop the mic. We nailed it. Just kidding.
What's your secret to living an abundant life?
100%. It's my morning routine. And I didn't have one before. And I genuinely believe it changed my life. About 10 years ago, I read The Miracle Morning for Real Estate Agents by Hal Elrod. And it was at a time where I was experiencing anxiety for the first time in my life. My kids were young. I had put the people on the bus and was trying to get the people in the right seats. And I was trying to scale this business, and it was succeeding externally, right? Like we were earning at a very high level. We were doing a lot of volume, and I just really felt lost and like I was drowning. And somebody gave me the miracle morning, and I about slapped him for, at first. I'm like, dude, my kids wake me up in the middle of the night. They're like, 2 and 5. Like, I'm not waking up any earlier. That's not happening. So, but I figured, once again, I'm desperate. I'll try anything. And so I started applying the morning routine, and I found that within 2 weeks of taking my time in the morning, setting myself up, putting on my oxygen mask first, I felt more energized, more focused, more clear headed, more relaxed, more enthusiastic, more excited, all these things. And so, if I'm honest, back then it was like a perfunctory process of checking boxes, just like everything else in my life, because I was moving so fast all the time. And it wasn't until 2020 when I read The Surrender Experiment and I decided to make that journey my own experiment that I was forced to really slow down in the mornings because, as I said, we were in a very small RV. My daughter was sleeping on the dinette, so there was nowhere to sit if I woke up. And if the weather wasn't nice and it was dark outside at 5 in the morning, I wasn't going to get out and wake everybody up. So I had to learn to just like relax, take it easy. And so I started to restructure my days. And instead of get up and hurry up, I don't take appointments before 10 a.m. I rarely take appointments on Mondays. I use that day to reflect and plan out the week. And Fridays are for fun, family, and friends. And the time I spend in the morning is really dragged out now, as long as it takes for me to get into an abundance mindset. I don't believe we wake up sunshine and rainbows. We wake up, we're stressed about something, we're exhausted, we're maybe frustrated, we're anxious, worried, whatever. We're human beings. It doesn't make us special that we experiencing these things, right? And so I think that there's a process to acknowledge where you are on the emotional scale. And there's tools that you can implement to move yourself along that scale to get from that negative side of anxious or worry or fear to that positive side of expectance and hope and excitement. And from there, any action you take is infused with a completely different energy that is far more magnetic than the energy that is there when you start to force yourself into action as a band-aid for the way you feel. Like, I'm worried, I'm stressed out, so let me go take more action to fill this void. It always feels like a grind. It feels like an uphill battle. It's like swimming upstream and feeling like you're drowning. I really believe if you do the work in the morning to set yourself up first, you show up better, you're more present, you have a better impact, you're more awake to the opportunities, the doors opening, miracles happening all around you. It's like getting on a raft and having a great adventure going downstream.
What did you learn later in life that you wish you would have learned sooner?
It's always working out. I loved my dad's advice to do whatever it takes, but I think there's an inside game that needs to be played first. Like, it's an inside out approach. We talk a lot about if you were hiring a business professional in some area of your life, a financial advisor, an attorney, a doctor, whatever, would you want to hire someone who is distracted, stressed out, preoccupied, multitasking, not giving you their full attention and you know it? They're just running on fumes, giving from an empty well. Would you rather work with a professional who's present, energized, focused, engaged, all in, and calm, right? And I believe it's more important to curate that within you before you show up and attempt to deliver service to others. And I think a lot of people live in illusion that they're doing their very best by running on fumes like that. And I think it's the hardest work of all to claim the wheel of our time. And instead of saying, I don't have enough time, and when I have time, like, everyone has the same amount of time. So how come some people can seemingly create abundance with ease and joy, and others are sacrificing everything in exchange for dollars, right? It's a choice, but it's the hardest work of all, and it's the inside game.
If you were to give an 18-year-old one specific piece of wisdom, what would it be?
Don't should all over yourself. I mean, get curious. Get curious.
Yeah.
Like, I think that there's ways, and this is what I love about real estate investing and entrepreneurship and things like this. I think there's ways to create abundance doing what you love. But I think it's beaten out of us early on to your point, in schools and things like that. So I think it's gonna be fun to see what unfolds for our kids, because I don't think there's so many rules anymore that were indoctrinated into us as kids. And I mean, I did grow up with an entrepreneurial mindset in an an entrepreneurial home when finances were tight. My mom was super innovative and creative, and they found ways to you know honestly be entrepreneurs and find other streams of income when necessary. So I think being resourceful, being curious is incredibly important for young people, and not thinking you need to have it all figured out. Totally.
If people would like to learn more about you, your podcast, and so forth, where can they find you?
Yeah, so you can find me on the podcast and other resources at pursuingfreedom.com. I love hearing from people. If you've heard this and you had a takeaway or something struck you, I feel like Rocky and I put these podcasts out in the world, and you never know if anybody's actually listening. So if you hear something of value or you have a question about something, it's me responding on LinkedIn and on Instagram. So I'm at Pursuing Freedom Official on Instagram, and on LinkedIn, it's Erin Bradley. And just shoot me a message. I really, truly, it makes my day to feel like something we said here was impactful in any way, shape, or form.
And we'll put that all in the show notes. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks for having me, Rocky.
Thanks for checking out this unedited video of the Richer Soul podcast. You can find the full episode along with all the back episodes at richersoul.com. This podcast is brought to you by Profit Comes First, where we help business owners to have a more profitable and growing business so they can live the life of their dreams. Check that out as well wherever you listen to all this content.